In 2014, the biggest name in Memphis rap walked up to another rapper from the same city and offered him a deal he thought couldn't be refused. But the other man said the one thing that Boss wasn't used to hearing. No, he took it to heart, and it lit one of the hottest beefs the streets of Memphis had ever seen. 7 years later, that same man was lying on the concrete outside a cookie shop in South Memphis, hit more than 20 times in broad daylight in the same neighborhood that raised him. By then, the battle lines were long drawn, and this city was no stranger to that kind of violence. But violence in Memphis usually comes with a reason, and this one looks senseless, at least on the surface. So why would two young men who'd already made it out of the trenches turn around and go to war with each other? It all leads back to 2008. If you haven't placed the names yet, the biggest name in Memphis rap is Yo Gotti, and the man gunned down outside that cookie shop was Adolph Thornton Jr., the world's Young Dolph. The two of them were cut from the exact same cloth, which is exactly why they could never share a throne. Dolph came up out of Castalia Heights, a stretch of South Memphis boxed in by train tracks and industrial land, cut off from the rest of the city like an island of its own. He was actually born in Chicago, but his people sent him south to his grandmother, figuring a strict old woman in a sheltered house beat the life his parents were living up north. What they didn't count on was that Castalia was every bit as brutal as Chicago, maybe worse, a neighborhood of abandoned houses and constant gunplay that raised him hard no matter how tight his grandmother held the reins. He carried her discipline his whole life, but as a teenager, he rebelled straight into the streets, hustling through high school and stacking real paper long before he ever touched a microphone. When he finally turned to music, he treated it exactly like the dope game, pushing project after project out of the trunk while his day one partner, Daddy-O, bankrolled the operation the same way he'd once fronted him the package. He was never a gangbanger in the traditional sense. He was a hustler, a cold and patient businessman who happened to be born in one of the deadliest pockets in America, and he refused to chase a record deal the way everybody else did. He pressed his own CDs, funded his own moves, and stacked mixtape on top of mixtape until Paper Route Empire wasn't just a label name, but a monument to the one thing he prized above money, and that thing was ownership. Nobody made Young Dolph but Young Dolph, and he intended to keep it that way until the day he died. Yo Gotti had walked a longer, harder road, and that road built a different kind of hunger. Real name, Mario Mims. He came out of the Ridge Crest Apartments in North Memphis and spent the better part of 2 decades clawing at the industry, reinventing himself again and again until it finally let him through. By the time the money arrived, his mind had already shifted from rapper to boss, and in 2012 he opened a label, CMG, dreaming of becoming the man who put the entire city on. But for 2 years, the throne room sat empty. Nobody signed. In a city overflowing with talent, and artists who could sign anywhere had little reason to kneel to Yo Gotti, and that quiet rejection gnawed at him long before Dolph ever entered the frame. Then, in 2014, he found Dolph's music, and he saw everything he'd been missing. He didn't just see a rapper, he saw the superstar who could finally give CMG a face, salvation for a brand that had never found its footing. In Gotti's mind, the deal was closed before it opened. He was the biggest, richest boss in Memphis, extending his hand to a kid from the same struggle, and there was no version of the world where that kid said no, except that's exactly what Dolph did. Calm, respectful, unbothered, he turned it down, explaining that he didn't want to sign under any man because he had too much of his own time and money invested to let the world claim Gotti made him. It was business, nothing personal. But a few months later, Dolph signed a distribution deal with Empire out of San Francisco, and that is the moment the whole thing curdled. Put yourself in Gotti's shoes. A man from your own city, a man who once moved weight beside your own brother Juke, tells you to your face that he'd never signed to anybody, then turns around and inks a deal somewhere else the first chance he gets. To a boss who measures the entire world in respect, that wasn't a business call. That was a lie delivered in public, a slap from someone who should have known better, and Gotti carried it like an open wound. Yet even the lie was only the surface. Underneath it sat something that guaranteed this could never be squashed, because Dolph had crossed a line no amount of money could ever redraw. He had been with the mother of Gotti's child, and rather than bury it, he turned it into a weapon. As far back as 2013, he was slipping shots into his records about a man whose baby mother he'd been intimate with, and over the years, those shots stopped being subtle. He turned Gotti's most private humiliation into a recurring punchline, mentioning it on song after song, daring the man to react. There is no deeper disrespect in the streets or the booth, and Dolph knew it. He wasn't just refusing Gotti's crown, he was standing on it. And the cruelest twist, the one that burned Gotti most, is that everything Dolph did to him, Gotti had once done to somebody else. Years earlier, before he was king of anything, 3-6 Mafia tried to sign a young Yo Gotti, and he refused them the same way Dolph refused him, then built his early buzz, partly by dissing them and using their name as a ladder. He'd even made records bragging about being with another man's woman. So when Dolph flaunted his independence and rapped about Gotti's baby mother, he wasn't inventing anything. He was running Gotti's own playbook straight back on him, and Gotti recognized every move. No man likes watching his own sins walk back through the door wearing a different chain. While the tension simmered, Dolph's career only climbed. Preach, cut it, get paid, one record after another turning him into a household name. And the bigger he got, the louder the wound throbbed on the other side of town. For a while, Dolph even played it down, brushing the rumors off in interviews until he sat with Sway and finally said it plain that the whole thing started because he refused to sign to CMG. Gotti, for his part, stayed publicly silent for a long stretch, playing the man above it all, letting subliminals do his talking across his own projects, accusing Dolph of dividing the city he claimed he was trying to unite, all while telling reporters he didn't do internet beef. But silence from a boss like Gotti is not peace, it's patience. And Dolph eventually got tired of the sneak shots and the behind-the-scenes power plays and decided to drag the whole thing into the open. By 2016, the patience had run out on both sides because Dolph was about to make a move a man in Gotti's position could not swallow. Dolph named an album King of Memphis, pure provocation, because that was the title Gotti had claimed since his 3-6 battling days. It was the crown Gotti had bled 2 decades to keep, and here was the man who rejected him, claiming it out loud on a project cover. To twist the knife, Dolph dropped it the same day Gotti released his own album. 1 city, 2 kings, 1 release date. Gotti's answer came through his newest artist, Black Youngster, who looked to the world like a harmless dance floor entertainer, but carried a very different reputation in the streets. Right after King of Memphis landed, Youngster drove into Castalia Heights, Dolph's own neighborhood, filmed himself rolling through it with an armed crew, and called Dolph out, asking where he was. To Dolph, it read like a cry for attention, and he laughed it off. But in Memphis, a laugh cools nothing. Walking through a man's hood with guns is a line, and once it's crossed, the squabbling is over. The business dispute was dead. What replaced it was a hunt. Once the diss record stopped being enough, the bullets took over, and the campaign against young Dolph stretched clean across the map. The first blood had actually spilled back in early 2015 in Charlotte during a star-studded day party where both camps ended up on the same stage. As the night wore on, witnesses described figures in orange paper route ski masks creeping through the VIP, and moments later, gunfire erupted, dropping Gotti's right-hand man and label vice president. By several accounts, it was Dolph's side that squeezed first that night, which meant that long before Dolph was ever a target, blood had already been spilled in his name. But Once the story reached the public, it flipped, with Dolph cast as the hero and Gotti as the villain. And the next time that same executive appeared in the news, he was listed as a suspect rather than a victim. From that night on, the two crews were locked into a cycle of get back neither could break, and the public only ever saw fragments of it. The pattern was set. Wherever Dolph went, death followed. No matter how far from Memphis he traveled, it escalated fast. In early 2016, gunmen ambushed Dolph's entourage outside a Charlotte hotel, dumping more than 40 rounds into 2 cars, and within days, police had suspects in custody, one of them a vice president of Gotti's own label. But the incident that turned Dolph into a legend came a year later, again in Charlotte, when a car pulled beside his Escalade and unloaded more than 100 rounds into it. It should have ended him. Instead, the truck was a rolling fortress, armored to swallow exactly that kind of assault, and not a single bullet touched him. His enemies wanted him so badly, they'd sent shooters to another state and emptied 100 rounds into a moving vehicle, and Dolph walked away clean. Then he did the thing that made the whole country fall in love with him. Within hours, he was back on a stage, performing the same diss record that likely triggered the attack, taunting the men who just tried to erase him. He didn't survive it quietly. He merchandised it, releasing a song called 100 Shots and building an entire album, Bulletproof, around the black Escalade on the cover, even spelling out the exact figure he'd heard the bounty was worth. And the world took him up on the dare. In September 2017, Dolph flew into Los Angeles, checked into a hotel in the heart of Hollywood, and stepped out to shop like he had no enemies alive. As he approached the store on Hollywood Boulevard, an Escalade crept up behind him. 2 men jumped out and ran him down in broad daylight, feet from the Walk of Fame. This time, the bullets found him. Bleeding badly, he staggered into a shoe store, flagged down the staff to call an ambulance, and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. When police caught 2 suspects fleeing, one turned out to be a childhood friend of Yo Gotti from Memphis. The dudes from Memphis had come all the way to California, and they'd even been staying in the same hotel. Yet, the case collapsed. The suspect walked, and Dolph recovered and laughed once more, telling his enemies to their faces that they had lost. That defiance is what made him nearly impossible to kill. He refused to move like a hunted man, wouldn't hide, wouldn't flinch, wouldn't give his enemies the satisfaction of watching him shrink. And for a few years after Los Angeles, it looked like the beef had finally burned out. Both sides got rich, both labels blew up, and the city seemed big enough for 2 kings, with only the occasional flare-up like Gotti's empty tour bus getting shot up in Nashville in 2019 to remind everybody the fire was still lit underneath. But the peace was an illusion. The machinery of the hunt never shut down. It only went quiet, waiting. And that machinery ran on the kind of muscle Gotti's side could reach for at will, because being a multimillionaire in Memphis means having an endless supply of shooters willing to slide for a fee. Gotti had family ties to a North Memphis crew called the Trula Mafia, crash-outs who rocked together and went to war over anything at all. 2 names from that world sit at the center of what came next. The first was Justin Johnson, a rapper called Straight Drop, a man so willing to do life over nothing that in early 2017 he got into a bowling alley argument, walked out to his car, came back with a chopper, and opened fire on the couple he'd fought, wounding them both in front of everyone. He got tracked through his girlfriend's license plate and arrested, facing decades. His running partner was Cornelius Smith, a man whose record read like a highlight reel of kidnappings and carjackings. These were the men on speed dial, the ones who'd smoke a stranger not out of hatred, but because the boss wanted it done. For a stretch, both of them sat locked up, and that alone may have kept Dolph breathing. The war ran both ways too, a piece most people miss. The word in the streets was that Dolph hadn't just survived Gotti's attempts, he'd answered them, allegedly putting a hit on Gotti's own head, and one of Gotti's trucks got shot at, only for the bulletproof plating to keep him alive too. Two of the richest men in Memphis, each accused of trying to erase the other, both saved by armor and luck. Stalemates like that don't end with a handshake, and behind the scenes, a price was quietly forming, $100,000, allegedly put up by Gotti's brother Big Jook to end young Dolph once and for all. The man accused of brokering it was an older Orange Mound figure named Hernandez Govan, a middleman with ties to Trula who would connect the money to the shooters. That plan had teeth even before it found Dolph, because Govan allegedly sent men after other Paper Route artists first, and in at least one attempt on a rapper named Paper Route Woo, the gun jammed and the target got away. What finally tipped the whole thing was something neither man controlled. The Trula Mafia's beloved leader, J Money, was killed in 2016, and his death fractured the entire set. Alliances shattered, friends drifted, and over the next few years, pieces of that world went cold on young Dolph. The cruel irony is that Dolph pulled them into his own orbit without ever knowing it. When he signed his cousin Key Glock in 2017, Glock's street ties brought men like Straight Drop and CEO Teezy into the same videos, the same rooms, the same circles as Dolph himself. Straight Drop wanted a spot on Paper Route Empire in the worst way, had direct access to Dolph, and kept getting passed over because Dolph only signed artists he genuinely rocked with and never handed spots to men who were just around to get something. That rejection curdled into resentment, and from behind bars on a probation violation, he started posting about feeling used by people he thought were real. When he finally got out, it was Govan and his brother who bet on him, fronting a $10,000 advance to pull him off the block and into the studio, and the direction that money pointed him was straight towards CMG. By 2021, CEO Teezy was texting Big Jook about a rapper named Straight Drop, telling him he needed to meet him, and Straight Drop was sitting face to face with Gotti's brother at a spot Jook co-owned, trading numbers, opening a direct line. The hunters had finally found their weapons, and the weapons were men who used to stand beside the target. All that was left was for Dolph to come home. By the fall of 2021, the trap was set, and young Dolph walked into it the way he walked into everything, fearless and alone. He was back in South Memphis, visiting family, cruising in a camo-wrapped Corvette he'd plastered all over the internet, moving like a man no hater could touch. Maybe he thought the camouflage made him invisible. Maybe he simply refused to let fear shrink his world. But the shooters knew about the bounty, and by the second gunman's own testimony, the plan was cold and simple. They knew Dolph came home every year around Thanksgiving for his turkey drive. They had money on the head of every Paper Route artist they could catch, and they were out hunting whoever crossed their path first. On November 17th, Dolph left his grandmother's house and stopped at a neighborhood bake shop, Makita's Cookies, supporting a local business the way he always did. He never saw the white Mercedes, stolen the day before, roll up behind him. They spotted his car by chance and followed it in. Straight Drop and Cornelia Smith came out of that car with a handgun and a Draco, ran to the storefront and unloaded through the window. Dolph was hit again and again, and though his brother managed to draw and return fire, wounding one of them, it was already over. He was struck 22 times. The medical examiner would later pull bullets from that final ambush alongside older rounds still lodged in him from the shootings he'd survived before, a grim map of a life lived under fire. Moments after the triggers went quiet, Straight Drop made a 12-second FaceTime call to Big Jook, and by the second shooter's account, spelled 4 letters into the phone, DOLPH. Then they drove to Orange Mound, parked in an associate's driveway, and walked inside still wearing the same clothes, where the money got split into cuts of $45,000 each, with a slice for the middleman. Straight Drop was so far gone, he later filmed a music video with the same car he'd used in the killing, parked outside the same abandoned house. But Dolph's murder didn't close the war. It detonated it. Everybody assumed he had no muscle in the streets, that he was a rapper and a father and a businessman with no army behind him. Everybody was wrong. After he died, a beast came out of the woodwork, and the city entered what people started calling the Slide for Dolph era, a stretch where anyone connected to the other side became a target. It began just 6 days later with a comedian named D-Money, a man loosely tied to Gotti's camp who made the mistake of joking about Dolph's murder online, then doubling down, refusing to let it go even as the whole city turned on him, joking that the police had locked up his grandmother for the case. Days after that, while he pumped the gas late one night with 2 women waiting in his car, a black Jeep crept up behind him. 2 masked men climbed out and cut him down before he ever turned around. The message rang through the whole city. Whether you had anything to do with it or not, if you were on that side and clowning Dolph's death, they were coming, and they kept coming long after logic stopped applying. They killed Straight Drop's own first cousin, a rapper named Big Newski, a man whose only obvious crime was his bloodline, cut down in a spray of chopper fire outside an apartment complex the moment word got out he was back in the hood. They hunted CEO Teasy, the Trula man police believed had helped find Dolph and steer the shooters to him, catching him outside his own house with a silenced weapon so quiet his body wasn't discovered until the next day. They even went after Black Youngster's brother, Tu Manuel, a man who had nothing to do with any of it, because Youngster was the one who'd walked through Dolph's hood with guns years earlier, and with the man himself out of reach, the closest body would do. Back to back to back, the bodies stacked and the reasons blurred until half the city seemed to be sliding for a man most of them had never met. Memphis logged more than 350 homicides in a single year, a record, and so many of them tangled into the same war that pulling one from the next became impossible. And Gotti's side did not exactly cool the fire either. Even after Dolph was buried, Big Juke mocked him publicly, clowning a mural painted in Dolph's honor and posting videos offering to pay struggling paper route rappers rent and car notes in exchange for a cut, a thinly veiled taunt at the roster their fallen boss left behind. To a city already boiling with grief, that kind of disrespect read like an invitation, and it made Juke the biggest name left standing on the list. He had always moved smart, always covered his tracks, rarely even showed his face in Memphis. But in January 2024, his uncle, a legendary Memphis kingpin, passed away, and the funeral pulled the whole family into town. On the morning of the service, Juke posted a message telling people to stay alert, to stay alive, to watch their backs at all times, as if some part of him already knew. After the funeral, as the family gathered at a restaurant for the repast, a white SUV with the plates stripped rolled alongside Juke's Escalade, and the men inside opened fire without hesitation. Big Juke was pronounced dead at the hospital. The man alleged to have financed Dolph's murder had been erased in what looked, to everyone watching, like the final chapter of revenge. It left Gotti burying the brother who taught him to hustle, who protected him, who was, in every way that mattered, his idol. The courts caught up slower than the streets, but they caught up. Straight Drop's own half-brother, Jamarcus, flipped first, pleading guilty to helping the shooters evade police in exchange for his testimony. Then, Cornelius Smith flipped too, became the state's star witness, and laid the whole arrangement bare, testifying to the $100,000 bounty in Big Juke's role, confirming the exact figure Dolph had rapped about years earlier when he first heard money was on his head, and even admitting under cross-examination that his own original lawyer had been paid $50,000 that came from CMG. It took the jury only about 2 hours to come back. Straight Drop was found guilty and sentenced to life, with 35 more years stacked on top, meaning he could be in his 70s before he's even considered for parole. But the alleged mastermind Hernandez Govan, refused to plea, demanded his day in court, and in August 2025, a different jury acquitted him after only a few hours because strong accusations and colorful testimony don't always clear the burden of proof. He walked out of that courtroom and turned his trial into a social media career. Lay the whole thing end to end, and the shape of it is almost unbearable. A man was offered a deal and he said no, and he said it with his chest, the way he did everything. That no wounded a boss's pride, and the pride festered into a beef, and the beef curdled into a hunt that chased Dolph across the country and finally caught him outside a cookie shop in the neighborhood that raised him. When he fell, he took a piece of the whole city down with him because the get back had no ceiling and no logic, only momentum. Young Dolph rejected Yo Gotti and paid with his life, but the true price was never his alone. It got spread across every man who stood near the two kings who couldn't let a single word go, and in the end, nobody won a throne. They just filled a graveyard. Rest in peace to young Dolph and to everyone this war swallowed on the way down.